I used to box.
You used to box.
Yeah, yeah. I used
Mashallah,
to
that's
box for
awesome.
12 years. I'm a huge boxing fan. Big MMA fan. I like soccer. Yeah, it's kind of football. Um, yeah, I did a lot of things my whole life, man. I used to be a DJ for a bit.
Oh, no
I had a
way.
radio show. Yeah,
What kind of music?
everything really, man. Like, hip hop back then I liked a lot more than hip hop now. It was a lot more politically conscious.
Yeah.
So I like, hip hop, rock, everything really.
Well, okay,
Yeah.
really nice. Yeah, I'm a big 70s, 80s rock
Okay.
kind of guy. Like, I love Pink Floyd.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Your pace.
No, Pink Floyd's good,
I
man.
felt like you just gained respect for me
Well,
right in that
Robert
moment.
Plant is very pro-Palestinian.
He is.
Very much so. Yeah.
I love that, man.
Yeah.
What'd you say his name was?
Robert Plant and Eric Clapton.
Eric Clapton. That's not Pink
Eric
Floyd.
Clapton was part of Pink Floyd, wasn't he?
I don't think he was.
Okay, maybe I'm conflating bands.
I think, what's his name? It's the other guy. He's always on Piers Morgan. He's like the Pink Floyd lead guitarist. Or
What's his name? Yeah, with the long hair.
he's not a good spokesperson, but amazing band.
Which other bands do you like?
I love Cage the Elephant.
Okay.
You know Cage the Elephant?
No. Are they
Oh,
new or old?
huh?
New or old?
They're like in the middle. They're like a 90s.
Okay.
90s. Yeah.
I'm a big U2 fan. I like U2 a bit.
Okay.
The Cure.
The Cure. Never heard
my
of
favorite
them.
band, British band.
British band.
Yes, I'm
Okay.
all over the place when it comes to music too, man. Yeah.
Yeah. Professor Khaled Beydoun, thank you so much for joining the Unstudied podcast. It's a pleasure to have you on, man.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to speak to you.
I know we're sponsored out here by Human Appeal in ICNA. I haven't been to ICNA in a very long time, since I was like 12 years old.
Uh-huh.
So being back here and doing this, very interesting for me, very unique, but it's an absolute pleasure to have you for sure.
Good memories, bad memories of ICNA?
I think they were good, honestly. I was like, oh, it's just a large farmer's market. That's how I felt when I saw it.
It's a good analogy. Yeah.
Yeah.
It feels that way. Yep.
Yeah. You know, a lot of people already know you from your incredible social media work, but many people don't actually know that you're an associate professor at Arizona State University, an author of multiple critically acclaimed books, American Islamophobia, Understanding the Roots and Rise of Fear. You teach politics, legal theory, law, and maybe not politics. I think you strictly stick to
Just
law.
law school, yeah.
Just law school, right? Because you're an attorney at heart and in your past. So it's curious, man. Like, what made you enter the social media space? How would you define the work that you're doing online?
Yeah, so I've been teaching law now for 11 years, writing several books on issues like Gaza, obviously, Islamophobia. And social media just seemed another sort of like springboard to educate, instead of students within a classroom setting, to educate broader audiences. It was a really dynamic tool to be able to push out the ideas, push out what I thought was not being addressed by mainstream media on platforms like X, platforms obviously like Instagram. So I just view social media as another educational tool.
How did you feel when October 7th happened and you found your role dramatically changing?
Yeah.
And taking a new form, more eyes, more influence than ever before?
It wasn't planned. Before October 7th, I used social media, and I had quite a sizable platform at that point. I think it was maybe 600,000 followers at that juncture. And when the genocide in Gaza began, obviously, as we all know, just the rolling footage of the graphic imagery of homes being bombed, hospitals being besieged, young children being maimed, people losing their limbs.
But you weren't using your platform for that kind of stuff before October 7th, right?
I mean, no, I would address Gaza. I would address what was happening in Palestine. My platform was obviously specifically tied to unfolding news issues that were pertinent to a Muslim audience. So, whether it was the Uyghur Muslim genocide or, what was taking place with Indian Muslims or what was happening in Pakistan. And when Gaza happened, I focused largely on that because it became the primary issue of the day.
So I've heard recent rumors that America and the West have over-exaggerated what's happening to the Uyghurs in order to run a propaganda campaign against China. Are the Uyghurs actually in as much of a genocidal state as people say they are?
Well, yes, and I think that's one thing that's really key to know is that legally speaking, there are distinct definitions of what a genocide is, right? I think that broader audiences, when they think genocide, they think mass killing, systematic numbers of people dying. What we're seeing in Gaza would qualify as the most sort of like graphic, murderous form of genocide. A distinct form of genocide is when a government tries to eliminate a culture, right? So you would qualify it as like cultural genocide. And what is taking place in East Turkestan, where the Uyghurs live in China, meets the definition of a cultural genocide. And that's demonstrated by the systems of internment camps, which lock away 2 million people, young Uyghur children put in these brainwashing orphanages. So it does meet the threshold of a genocide in that regard.
So they're imprisoning 2 million Uyghur adults and then taking their children and putting them through China government propaganda education system kind of thing?
Yeah, it's an entire strategy, right? So it's key to know the history to fully understand what's taking place with Uyghur Muslims. But so
do you know what's happening? Because many people don't.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I've studied it really closely, and I've written about it in my third book on global Islamophobia. So the Uyghur want their own independent sovereign states in the same way that Palestinians want their own nation. And they had a nation up until 1950, and their nation was annexed by the state of China. In recent years, they've been mobilizing, organizing, primarily outside of China because China is an authoritarian government. And as a consequence of that organizing, China has responded by cracking down on them in a series of ways. And one of the ways that is what you just mentioned, putting away 1.5 to 2 million in concentration camps. So it is the deliberate design of the Chinese government to suppress that movement. And the way they've done it is by way of surveillance, essentially criminalizing the free exercise of Islam. You might have heard during Ramadan that it's essentially illegal to observe the month of Ramadan. They've locked down and shut down a number of masajid, put children in these brainwashing orphanages, and like you've said, the internment camps.
Yeah.
At the Ansari podcast, one of our closest partnerships is Muslim Professionals. That's because they're a free community connecting thousands of Muslims across the United States, working at places like Google, Apple, and Spotify. Their vision is to connect the Muslim world, whether that's help finding a new job, exchanging business ideas, forming partnerships, or just making new friends. Sign up at muslimprofessionals.us for free. Let's grow together, win together. I've teamed up with Pomeroy, a full-service marketing agency founded by a Muslim businessman with over 20 years of experience. Whether you're building your business, improving your brand, or running a nonprofit, Pomeroy will help you improve your revenue, increase your return on investment. Visit pomeroy.com/Ansari and get a free consultation today, or just mention the podcast and you'll get a free consultation.
So it's very interesting for you as a Muslim when you look at the now global order where there's two powers that are competing, America and China. Where should we stand or lie in something like this? I mean, you and I are both Muslim Americans, so obviously there's a leniency towards America, but
well, that's a complex question, right? I think that we're Muslim, we're also American.
Right.
And we live in this country, right? So there's a nuance there with regard to, how to respond to that question. But I think that, look, we shouldn't be forced to choose between one or the other. Like, the world in morality specifically doesn't work and shouldn't be constricted within any kind of dichotomy or binary. So for me, it's important for us to call the United States out when the United States is engaged in policy that deserves condemnation. And one of those policies, obviously, this full-fledged categorical support of the state of Israel and their genocidal war machine in Gaza. We got to call that out. We have the benefit in this country up to a point where we have the right to freely criticize, as a consequence of free speech, governments like ours when they engage in support of genocide. We should also support our Uyghur Muslim brothers and call out what China is doing as well. One problem with social media, and I know you want to talk about social media in a bit also, is there's a tendency to sort of like glamorize governments that are on the right side when it comes to Palestine. And China has said and done a lot of good things when it comes to Palestine. but that does not indemnify them from the crimes that they have commit against the Uyghur people.
Where do you think the world global order is heading to today? Well, let me ask you about Israel and where it's at right now.
Yeah.
Some theorize, like John Mearsheimer, that Israel is on the verge of internal collapse, civil collapse, that there might be even a civil war between the Israelis themselves.
Yeah.
And recently Netanyahu has called that he will absolutely take over Gaza. He hasn't even held it back this time. He's never held it back, but he made it even more clear. And Trump seems to be supporting him. I'm not really sure where Trump lies in all of this. Where do you see us going with the Israeli-Gaza situation?
You know, there's a lot of rifts and a lot of turbulence within Israel, and you see that as of now. I mean, the government in Israel right now is hardline, right? It's a hardline, right-wing, pro-settler. We want to take over the entire land government. And there are elements in Israel who disagree with that. There are elements in Israel who are secular, not with the hardline Jewish sort of right that controls this government, and that want a two-state solution. But for as long as AIPAC is driving a one-state oriented kind of policy, I don't see Trump shifting meaningfully in the short term.
Yeah. What's interesting about that is someone pointed out that Israel today is equivalent to, if you take a Muslim country and 50% of the population is ISIS and 50% of the population is Muslims from California. So that's what.
That's a good one, actually, man. Yeah. It's a good analogy. By Muslims, you mean like liberal, surfing.
Hey, man.
Yeah. No, I mean, look, I think Israel's heading towards a lot of instability, to be honest with you. I mean, you might have read their economy is very volatile. They've lost trillions of dollars as a consequence of what's happening in Gaza. 25% of their population, I think is the last figure that I saw, has left the country. Obviously, opposition to this government. I mean, then there's the effect of psychological trauma that a considerable segment of their population has to go through by serving the war. Large incidents of suicides, large incidents of depression. So that society is going to be marred for a long time. My hope is that on a global scale, you know, Israel has become a pariah state, you know, on a global level, that they're going to find it in their best interest at some juncture to broker some sort of deal where the people of Gaza get to stay, and Palestine, inshallah, will achieve their vision of self-determination. Sorry for being long-winded.
No, that was great.
Yeah.
Do you think that the reports that there's a rift between Trump and Netanyahu are accurate?
Yeah. I do, but I think that it's also really important for us to not conflate personality rifts with policy rifts. I don't think Netanyahu and Trump like each other. I think they're both kind of the same character in many ways, right? Yeah. They're megalomaniacs, hyper masculine, super alpha. They gotta be the guy. They gotta be the shot caller in the room, right? So it's hard for that kind of character to coexist with one another. I don't think they get along personally. But again, when you look at this from a real politics standpoint, AIPAC gave Trump, or AIPAC acolytes gave Trump more than $100 million. And their only objective is to be hardline when it comes to Israel. Trump is not going to break away from that. It's not all dictated by his relationship with Netanyahu.
And it's not just all money, right? One of the things that Muslims miss is that AIPAC gives human beings as well. They have on-the-ground boots that walk in and talk to congressional office holders all the time. There is an AIPAC guy with every single one of these congressmen and the president.
And look, and I think that's a well put together lobbying machine.
Yeah.
That's how power is shaped and defined in this country. It's not a conspiracy.
Yeah.
That's how democratic government in a capitalist context is conditioned to work. You know, and they're just playing the game and playing it very well to push their interests.
Mm.
Why you laugh? Why you smirking?
Because you were laughing.
You know, I think that, look, you saw Trump, you followed the news recently?
No, what?
You know, Trump was in the Middle East and
met
with MBS and met with all these guys.
Right.
He got a plane. They gave Qatar
gave him a $4 million plane. Yeah, how do you feel about that?
I think it's weird, man.
Right? I think that's awesome.
Really? You like that?
Yeah.
Tell me why.
I think they do it anyways.
So you like it because it's happening in front, behind,
Yeah.
behind closed
I mean,
doors.
that's the thing, man. Everyone hates on Trump, and I'm like,
Yeah.
he's doing the same thing. He's just telling you guys.
So you appreciate the transparency.
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
Because at least you get
Yeah.
to know thy enemy.
But it goes against the Constitution, right? There's a specific provision, and sorry to be a law professor here, but I'm a law professor.
Right.
Presidents cannot get gifts when they're presiding over that position.
Well, that's why people think that we've reached almost the level of dictatorship, almost the level
Yeah.
of oligarchy, because Trump has done something incredible. He's wiped out Congress. Like, Congress isn't a thing right now under his rule.
Well, Congress is still also led by Republicans, so they're politically aligned with him.
So do you think there's a real possibility Trump's able to end the genocide in Gaza?
I think so. I think that, I mean, you've seen his rhetoric in the last several days change, right? He's been condemning Netanyahu. He's been acknowledging the atrocities in Gaza. I think he's realizing that a large segment of the American people, not only on the left, but also elements on the, I live in Arizona. There's a lot of libertarians and conservatives in Arizona who are becoming fed up with this genocide, right? Why are we spending our tax dollars on a foreign crisis? So I think Trump, as long as he reads the tea leaves, are shifting in a way that politically are detrimental to him. He can change, and I think it'll end, in my opinion, in the next 3 to 4 months.
So really,
I think so.
what do you think the ending will be?
I think the ending is going to be Trump taking the position that Netanyahu is to sort of like end his operations there, and I think it's already kind of happening. What they're waiting on is what to do with the people, because, you know, Netanyahu and them, they want the entire strip.
Right. Yeah, so I mean, that's the big question right there, is the people.
And I think Trump wanted that too in the beginning.
Right.
Remember that video he put out when he first took office?
Yeah, the AI video.
Yeah, exactly. And he realized that people weren't going to go for that, man. And yeah, so I that's the big question. A couple of days ago, they floated the idea of sending 1 million people from Gaza into Libya. People didn't go for that either. So Trump is very wary of his public image.
So what made you say in 3 to 4 months then?
I can see the end of like the violent military sort of assault that we're seeing right now coming to an end. And then aid coming into Gaza, letting international human aid organizations like Human Appeal obviously come in. But what that means in terms of a political resolution is what I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you think of a one-state solution? I think that's never brought up by our great Muslim thinkers or political thinkers enough that are pro-Palestine. I mean, all Palestine was the one-state solution. Muslims, Jews, Christians, people of other dominations living together under one state. Why don't we have a South Africa solution? Like Imam Tom came on once and he told me there's 3 to 4 solutions. There's either the South Africa solution, where the oppressed win and they come together. There's the Algeria, France genocide solution, which is the oppressed kick out the oppressor.
Yeah.
And then the third is there's the American Indian solution, which is the genocider wins. So I'm sitting here thinking, well, I don't want the genocider to win, obviously. I don't think the Palestinians will be able to drive the Jews out in the Algerian sense out of Israel just yet. I think so in the future. Why don't we go for the South African solution?
I mean, that's an issue of power, right? I think that the one state solution is no longer, for now, it's not politically palatable, because the Israelis won't go for the one state solution, because it's contradictory to their idea of a Jewish state, number one. And second, the demographics of the Palestinians would supersede that of the Israeli Jews. So there are people like me who are advocates of the one-state solution, right? One people, regardless of Jewish, Palestinian, Christian, Palestinian, Muslim, get to live in one state. Everybody has equal rights, equal voting power. And a lot of Palestinian intellectuals that I respect, people like Rashid Khaled and Noura Erakat, are advocates of the one-state solution. But it is not politically sort of like practical at this time, because the Israeli government is categorically against it.
Well, obviously, I mean, the South African government was against it.
Yeah. Yeah, but the South African, so there's distinctions, right? With there's historical distinctions, and I'm not sure if you want to get into that, but South Africa is not, there's parallels, but there's also some important differences.
Okay. Do you think it's beneficial for Muslims to have China be because China's already basically the number one economy.
Yeah.
That's on its way to becoming the number one empire. Do you know whether it's in our benefit as an Ummah to have them as the top or not?
I mean, that's, that question, to be honest with you, man, is like, it's hard to respond because I'm no fan of China. I'm a constitutional law professor. When I think about constitutional law and Muslim rights specifically, the United States theoretically still has amendments that are in place that allow us to speak freely on issues like this within an open forum. This isn't the case in a country like China, which is an authoritarian communist country where people don't have free speech rights, where people don't have free exercise of religion rights, where people don't have assembly rights. Now, I say that with the qualifier that the United States, although a democratic government which respects individual liberties, is still advancing many of the most atrocious, horrific human rights crises in the world, right? So I would rather neither, to be honest with you, dictate global policy because there are ills and perils associated with each. But I would rather live in the United States than live in China.
Where do you see your role with what you've been doing on social media with Gaza and the Muslim political sphere in general?
Well, look, man, for me, I'm an educator, right? I'm older. Like, I'm in, mid 40s. So I still remember a time when I was your age, in my mid 20s, my heroes were authors and scholars and intellectuals, people like Edward Said and James Baldwin. We didn't have social media at that point, right? So for people to be politically involved, social media was beginning to emerge. But for people to be politically involved, you have to go to debates, you have to go to lectures, you have to go to protests. And for me, I'll be frank with you, I don't like social media. Like, I'm not sure if you've noticed, like,
I don't think I have.
It's kind of counterintuitive, but I don't do a lot of front-facing stuff. Like,
you don't.
I don't do video. I don't share my photos. I'm not the center of my social media. I like to have ideas and topics be focal. And for me, like I mentioned earlier, social media is, inshallah, like podcasts like yours, hopefully they thrive because that's where young people and young minds are being shaped. And I'm a firm believer as an educator that you got to go to where the masses are. So if the masses aren't reading books anymore or reading op-eds or articles anymore, you got to write posts. You got to share stories. You got to put up tweets. And inshallah, my hope is that if you read a post, you might want to pick up a book on Gaza.
Have you thought about the fact that your work on social media is directly competing with the likes of CNN, Fox News, the global Zionist propaganda machine that exists, and you and others like you basically won?
I really like the way you frame that because a primary catalyst for me to continue using and being on social media is a lot of the stories that I share are intentionally being ignored and erased by legacy media outlets like CNN, Fox, and so on. It's hard to say, like, that issue of whether we won or not is a tough sort of thing to grapple with, right? Because if we technically haven't won because the genocide's still ongoing, right? So we haven't won to the extent where we're impacting policy. But where we have won is, amongst especially younger minds, like shaping their opinions. I mean, you've seen that the degree of support for Palestine is unprecedented. And I think that's a direct reflection of the power of social media, which is why my page has been shadow banned. Like 60, I used to get like 80,000 likes on a post or 400,000 views on a story. Now it's like 30 to 40% of that. So, one of my quotes is, censorship is an admission of guilt and admission of losing. So they've had to do that because they've realized how impactful social media has been.
What do you think is one thing that Muslims need to start doing politically in America?
Good question. I would say three things. So I think media is very important. So podcasts like yours are really key, especially alternative media, because now people are consuming media in ways that are no longer terrestrial or connected to mainstream outlets. So media, number one. Second, I would say political organizing. So you mentioned APAC and the importance of lobbying. I would love to see in like 5 to 10 years, especially now that Muslims in this country are coming into real wealth, that we can build a lobbying institution that is on par with an APAC. Third, I would like to see more Muslims coming into law and doing civil rights oriented work, because there's a great need there in our community.
Oh, is there?
Very much so.
Well, why is that? What do you mean?
I mean, you see what's happening now with students being suspended and expelled as a consequence of organizing and protesting for Palestine. They need civil rights lawyers,
Yeah.
right? People getting fired. You saw that sister of Microsoft got fired when she stood up against how their algorithm was feeding what was happening in Gaza. These people need attorneys.
People getting imprisoned.
And not only attorneys, but attorneys that not only understand these issues, but can empathize with these issues. I don't practice law anymore, but I get 20 to 25 calls a week to take on cases from Muslims.
Why do you think America still feels empowered to do this to Muslims? Even with what's wild to me is like Qatar will give Trump an airplane like we just discussed.
Yeah.
I saw the interview between Tucker Carlson and the Prime Minister of Qatar, Tucker Carlson, and Khaled, whatever, from Saudi Arabia. And they're saying, they're going, yeah, we're one of the biggest investors in AI. We're one of the biggest investors in Fox. The guy that works with Bin Salman is one of the biggest investors in Fox News, Arab. Right?
Yeah, his name is Khaled bin Walid. I think he owns
Khaled bin Walid.
He owns 39% of Fox.
39% of Fox. That's insane. I didn't even know that.
Yeah, the majority owner is a guy named Rupert Murdoch.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So we're talking about Fox. We're talking about X. They have huge investments in X, huge investments in AI, Facebook, all of them. And yet they've used none of that monetary power to be like, hey, maybe Fox, stop calling Muslims terrorists.
Well, two things, man. I don't want to burst your audience's bubble, but number one, we got to get past this myth that all Muslims are committed and invested in Muslim issues, right? Just because these guys in Qatar and these guys in Saudi Arabia are Muslim does not mean that they're oriented toward Muslims' best interests. That's a myth. That's romantic. I wish it was that way, but it isn't. Second, these people are rational actors. They're acting and investing in ways that benefit them directly and personally. So that's why these uber wealthy guys are investing in these companies, because they're lucrative, but they're lucrative for them.
Isn't that weird though? That a Muslim, I mean, that's so mind blowing to hear that a Muslim owns 39% of Fox News.
He owns a big portion of Citibank too, if I'm not mistaken. Look, I used to work for a law firm in Dubai many years ago. The degree of wealth there is astronomical. And second, you'd be surprised at how much of these big Fortune 100 companies have large stakes owned by Muslims.
Yeah. Bro, you look at the NBA. You said you're a sports guy.
Yeah.
You have Emiratis everywhere.
Yeah.
You look at
on the Knicks, New York Knicks jersey.
Got the Emirates on it.
Qatar owns a Qatari guy owns PSG. Two Emiratis own Man City, and the other one owns Newcastle.
Each one of them, I see Bahrain or one of them on their jerseys.
And look, not to knock that, man. Like, look, people should invest wisely and invest in ways that benefit their countries. But I agree with you in that it is highly hypocritical that these guys are invested in organizations that are demonizing Muslims, Fox News specifically.
Yeah. I mean, that's crazy to me, because if a Zionist owned 39% of Fox, you wouldn't hear a single bad thing about Zionists on Fox. And you don't hear, obviously, a single bad thing about Zionists on Fox. So I just think that's like one thing we can learn from our enemies is if a Zionist, you can damn near guarantee if a Zionist owned 39% of Fox, nothing would be said about them. They don't even own it, and nothing is said about them.
Yeah, yeah. No, it's something and that's why alternative media is very important, right? And it's actually a good sort of development that younger people are not consuming their information anymore off of the Fox News and you're gonna continue to see legacy media's influence to decline and decline and decline. I mean, if you go online and try to read a New York Times article, they got those paywalls.
Right.
That's an indication that they're declining and that they're relying more on new sources of funding. So we got to be intelligent, man, and using alternative channels to disseminate the message. And social media is very powerful, right? To me, it's crazy. Like I wrote this book, and it takes tons of time. I could put up a post and it go viral, and it'd be seen by 500,000 people, right? Which speaks to the power of social media.
4 sentences.
It's insane. Yeah.
I mean, you saw the impact of Joe Rogan, Theo Vaughn, Candace Owens on the Gaza-Palestine phenomenon as well. I mean, that's been incredible, and they're not even Muslim.
Yeah, and you don't have to be, and that's the beauty of this issue is that as Muslims, the first thing I'd say is that Palestine is not a Muslim issue. It's a universal human rights issue, in my opinion. I think as Muslims, and one thing that I really pride myself on is I will try to stand up for any people, regardless of who they are, what it is they believe, just as long as they're going through a crisis, right? Just because we shouldn't be sort of like self-interested in only supporting people that look and believe like us.
Yeah. I think it's a Muslim issue with a real politic framework, right? Like it is a Muslim issue because even when like the Jews talk about it, or the Zionists talk about what's going on, they talk about it in a spiritual perspective. They talk about it in a religious perspective. I mean, that's why I believe that Israel might fall in the next 3-4 years by 2026, 2027. Because you saw that the top rabbi in Israel tell Netanyahu that you're the last leader of Israel before the Messiah comes. You saw that?
Yeah, I mean, I saw that, but I don't, to me, like, that kind of zealous fundamentalism, I don't take too seriously because I don't believe it.
I think one of the reasons is because Allah has not allowed their empires to ever last more than 80 years, I believe.
Okay.
And they have like a thing, it's like the unlucky 80 or something. And so they're at like 76 years, 77. Right.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, I think that whether that's true or not, I don't know.
Isn't that interesting?
It is interesting.
Yeah.
But for me, like I'm a really logical, rational thinker.
Yeah.
And I try to like address things that I can control and that I think that are really important.
Are you religious at all? I don't want to ask you a personal question. Okay.
I'm religious, but I don't always view these issues from a religious lens, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's one thing that I would love to get your perspective on, because I actually think that politics is spiritual. It's a spiritual battle.
Yeah.
So many of the times I find that our best advocates for Gaza are almost secular. Not you, I'm talking about like others, especially even the ones that go to the protests.
Yeah.
And I feel like you have to be spiritual in order. One of the reasons this is happening to us is spiritual, and we have to address that.
I think there's a spiritual dimension to it, right? But I think that to frame things in to frame the struggle as purely religious or spiritual can be exclusionary as well.
Yeah.
Right? I think a couple of things, right? So the Palestinian people are really heterogeneous, right? The majority of them are Muslim. There's also Christians. There's also segments of Palestinian society that aren't religious at all, right? And I think that when you communicate the issue, so for me as an educator, and especially being on social media, my aim every morning, so I'll try to put up, like, depending on the news cycle, at least 5 posts a day. And I'm very sort of mindful of crafting my messaging in a way that is going to reach anyone and everyone, right? So if you frame things in a way that only speak to a Muslim audience, you've basically constricted who your audience is. And Palestine's a marathon, man. Like, this issue has been ongoing since 48. since the first Nakba. And since my childhood, I've always seen that individuals and crowds who've supported Palestine have been Muslim, have been Christian, have been Jewish, have been Black, have been Latino. So even though, and I respect the fact that you think it's spiritual, that we have to be mindful and not conveying it exclusively in that way, publicly speaking.
Yeah.
I think, to be honest with you, I think when evangelical Zionists do that, it does a disservice to their efforts.
Well, because their efforts are genocidal.
Well, their efforts are genocidal. Their efforts are imperial, but and their efforts can be ethnocentric, right? That this is our land and our land alone. That is not going to resonate with, let's say, a Christian white American walking down Main Street. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Let me ask you one last question here.
Sure.
Do you believe there's a war on Muslims globally?
Yeah. That's the title of my third book. Yeah. The New Crusades, the global war on Islamophobia and the global war on Muslims. Yes, but it's not sort of like, how do I say this? It's not conspiratorial, right? I don't want young Muslims to believe in this whole idea that there's this like new crusades where the West is invested in like killing Muslims across the board. What happened after 9/11 in this country specifically is the Bush administration and successive administrations locked in on Muslims as the new boogeyman, right? So it became a politically rational tool to demonize Muslims. And you see governments around the world, places like France and India and Myanmar and China, adopt this logic to push this war on terror message. And that's why there's a global war on Muslims. But as soon as it's not politically convenient anymore, and they find a new boogeyman and a new rival, you'll see that decline.
Okay. And is that the claim that you're making in your book? Is that the main claim?
It's one of the fundamental claims, yeah.
Okay. And I see you've written multiple books here.
Yeah.
You got American Islamophobia, Understanding the Roots and Rise of Fear. And then you also co-edited Islamophobia and the Law.
Yep.
So is American Islamophobia, Understanding the Roots and Rise of Fear the one that you were just mentioning right now?
No, that's the third book called The New Crusades, Islamophobia and the Global War on Muslims. That's my fourth book.
That's with the Uyghur woman in the front.
Exactly.
Right. When's that coming out?
It's already out.
Oh, it's already out. Okay.
Came out in 2023.
Okay.
Yeah,
But you're
been
saying there's a newer book or no?
No, well, this is the newest book.
This is the newest book.
Yeah. Yep.
Eyes on Gaza, Witnessing
Yeah.
Annihilation.
Yep.
Well, Professor Khaled Beydoun, that's all the questions I have for you. You got any final thoughts before we head off?
No. Best of luck to your podcast, man. Inshallah, we see you thriving more. Talk about politics, but talk about fun stuff too. Young folks need to have some lighthearted material as well.
Yeah. You watch any comedy? Are you into comedy at all?
I do, man. Yeah. I mean, not recently, but my favorite show of all time is a show called Silicon Valley.
Oh, I love Silicon Valley.
Great show, right?
Yeah.
I think that show's hilarious, man.
That tall dude. He's this guy.
Ehrlichman, yeah. Which is your favorite show?
I'm a That 70s Show kind of guy,
Okay,
man.
cool.
Yeah. But I mean, I love Silicon Valley.
I think that's the funniest show, man. One of the funniest shows of all time.
Yeah.
Breaking Bad, obviously.
Okay.
Yeah.
I didn't
The Wire. The
really
Wire
know
is a
that.
crime-oriented show based out of Baltimore.
You said, where do you live again?
I live between Phoenix and Michigan, so I split my
Okay.
time between both.
Man, let's definitely run one in my studio. It's
Let's
going
do
to be
it.
like a deeper vibe.
Okay.
Let's do it again, inshallah.
Sure.
Professor Khaled Beydoun, Associate Professor of Law at the Arizona State University and author of the critically acclaimed American Islamophobia, Understanding the Roots and Rise of Fear, as well as his new book, Eyes on Gaza, Witnessing Annihilation. Thank you so much for joining the Ansari
Thanks, brother.
podcast,
Thanks for having me.
brought to you by Human Appeal. Thank you so much.
Appreciate it, brother.
And thank you guys for listening to the Ansari podcast.
There's so many nonprofits out there all promising the same thing, and we never know which one to actually trust, which one will actually invest our money into the future of the communities that they serve. That's why I've partnered with Human Appeal USA, because they don't just react to emergencies, they invest in their communities. They don't just give to the orphan and the poor, they invest in their education, their healthcare, and their future. Not just short-term reaction, but long-term investment. Donate at give.humanappealusa.org/Ansari podcast, where you can give to humanity and give to the Ummah. I'm so excited to be bringing you guys this exclusive opportunity for Ansari podcast listeners. We've officially partnered up with Elif to back the next generation of Muslim founders. We're partnering up to launch the Elif Network, a global pipeline into startups for Muslim builders. So if you're a developer, an engineer, a designer, a writer, a marketer, or more, and you'd like to work for one of the fastest growing startups in the world today, then head over to elif.build/network-tap or press the link in my bio and apply for free today.